I turned 35 last Saturday. Nothing too exciting, just another year older. But my wife Emily had been oddly excited about it all week. She kept texting nonstop, smiling at her phone, and acting all mysterious like she was planning something big. I assumed it was a romantic dinner or maybe a surprise party to patch things up after our recent rough patch. Honestly, I was just relieved she still cared enough to plan anything at all. Things between us had been tense for months, not the shouting and slamming doors kind of tense, but the kind that seeps into everything: quiet dinners, half-hearted kisses, long silences in bed. It felt like being roommates with a stranger who used to know your soul. But part of me kept thinking maybe we just needed time, maybe love needed patience. So when she told me she had something special planned for my birthday, I let myself hope. We met in college. Emily was a marketing major with a shiny future, and I was a broke kid working 3 jobs to keep my scholarship. She was beautiful, charismatic, born into a family that used last names like currency, and I was not. Her family never liked me, especially her father, Bradley Whitmore I, who treated me like I was lucky just to breathe the same air as them. Still, Emily said love was enough, and for a long time I believed her. After graduation, we married young and moved into a modest apartment she always called temporary, even after 6 years. I worked my way up at my company while she drifted from job to job, cushioned by her family's money. Every time I achieved something, it felt like her parents found a way to downplay it, like they were allergic to the idea of me becoming enough. Still, I kept pushing, thinking if I worked harder, they'd eventually respect me, or at least shut up. So on my birthday, I worked the day shift and came home expecting dinner or some kind of surprise, but the apartment was empty. Emily had texted me to meet her at her parents' place because the surprise was waiting there. My gut twisted a little, but I told myself not to overthink it. Maybe she wanted to show her family she believed in me again. Maybe this was her olive branch. I pulled up to the Whitmore mansion, this massive stone estate in the suburbs with columns and lions guarding the front like it was Versailles. I rang the bell, straightened my shirt, and tried not to feel completely out of place. Emily opened the door wearing a red dress I hadn't seen in months, her smile too wide and not at all warm. Something in her eyes told me this wasn't going to be a celebration. I stepped inside and saw the living room packed with people: her parents, her brother Dylan, her cousin Ava, some of her family's rich friends I vaguely recognized. Everyone was holding champagne glasses, standing around like they were about to toast to a new job or an engagement. Nobody said anything at first, just awkward smiles and tight nods. Then Emily stepped in front of me and said, "Jake, we have something special for your birthday." Her father snickered, not laughed, snickered, like a villain in an old-school cartoon, while Emily pulled out a thick manila envelope from behind her back. I blinked, confused, still hoping for plane tickets or something cheesy and sweet. Instead, she handed me the envelope and said, "Surprise. I'm leaving you for someone who isn't a disappointment." Time stopped like a movie, freezing mid-scene, while my brain struggled to process what had just happened. The room was dead silent except for the sound of her mother pouring more champagne. I looked at her, then at everyone else, wondering if this was a joke, a sick, humiliating prank. But their faces were all smug, like they'd rehearsed this moment and were waiting for my breakdown. Bradley looked at me, sipping his drink, and said, "We never thought she'd actually marry someone so beneath her." The words didn't even sting anymore, they just confirmed what I'd known all along. Emily shoved the papers into my hands with a smirk, expecting tears, a tantrum, or begging. But something inside me flipped, like a switch turning off all emotion and turning on steel. I asked if anyone had a pen, and for a second, you could hear the air shift in the room. Emily's expression faltered, the corner of her mouth twitching like the reaction wasn't what she had imagined. Her dad handed me his overpriced Mont Blanc pen, the same one he used to sign real estate deals and write donation checks to political campaigns. I took it, walked to their marble kitchen island, and calmly signed every single line on those divorce papers. No words, no drama, just the sound of my pen moving and someone coughing awkwardly in the background. When I finished, I looked Emily straight in the eye and said, "Thanks for the birthday gift. Best one yet." Then I handed the pen back to her dad, turned around, and walked out the front door like I was just leaving a dinner party. I didn't slam anything, didn't raise my voice, I just left. Their confusion was louder than anything I could have shouted, and the silence behind me was worth more than every insult they'd ever whispered when they thought I wasn't listening. I got in my car and started driving, no idea where I was going, just needing to put distance between me and that twisted celebration. I ended up at a dusty little bar near the edge of town, the kind with flickering lights and one bartender who doesn't ask questions. I sat at the counter, ordered a whiskey, then another, and just stared at my phone. That's when the texts started rolling in. First it was Emily. Why didn't you say anything? Are you seriously not going to fight for us? You're just proving my point by running away. I should have been broken, devastated, but instead something cold and sharp began forming in me. Not rage exactly, not the kind that burns hot and reckless, but something deeper, more dangerous. The kind of anger that makes lists, builds cases, and waits patiently. They thought they'd humiliated me into silence. What they didn't realize was I'd been collecting ammunition for years. I knew their secrets. When you marry into a family that talks openly in front of the help, you hear things, big things. I knew about Bradley's fake charity funds, Ava's affair with a married politician, Dylan's little pharmaceutical side hustle that his parents pretended not to see. I knew Emily's late work nights didn't smell like boardrooms, they smelled like cologne that wasn't mine. That night I called Zach Porter, my college roommate, and the most vicious divorce attorney in the city. Then I spent hours screenshotting every questionable message on our shared cloud account before she could lock me out. I even backed up the financial records I'd quietly kept of every time her family used our accounts for shady transfers. And I made a real list of everyone in their circle who'd hear my side of the story first. By the next morning, Zach had already filed a counterclaim. I withdrew my half from our joint accounts and left hers untouched, just enough rope. I rented a small storage unit and moved everything important out while she was probably sipping mimosas. I didn't say a word, I just vanished from the life they thought they controlled. Emily expected tears. Instead, she got silence. And silence, when used right, is the loudest weapon of all. I wasn't broken, I was just getting started. It's been a week since the birthday ambush, and Emily's texts have gone from smug to confused to something dangerously close to desperation. She clearly expected me to crawl back, to beg her for a second chance like I was the one who ruined us. Instead, I disappeared from her radar, moved into a short-term Airbnb, and focused on the one thing I still had full control over: myself. Letting her silence turn into panic was the most peaceful revenge I'd ever tasted. If you find these stories inspiring and they motivate you to take action, please comment 9. If not, comment 0. Your feedback means a lot to us. Thank you for your valuable time. My lawyer, Zach, bless him, doesn't believe in second chances, only legal victories. He already filed a response with the court, listing infidelity, emotional cruelty, and calculated public humiliation as grounds for contested divorce. He was especially delighted when I handed over screenshots from our shared cloud showing Emily's late-night flirt sessions with her co-worker, Roman Ellis. The man sends more winky faces than actual words. It's amazing how careless people get when they think they're untouchable. I didn't confront her, didn't send her a single message. I let the evidence speak for itself. Zach called it strategic silence, I called it dignity. While Emily was probably preparing another social media post about self-discovery, I rented a storage unit and cleared out everything that belonged to me from our apartment. I left the couch, the wall art, and the air fryer. She could keep the aesthetics. I was reclaiming my peace. Emily's family still hadn't reached out, not that I expected them to. The Whitmores never dealt with problems, they outsourced them. But I knew people in their circle, investors, clients, former staff, people who still remembered how I helped Bradley recover from a PR disaster last year without asking for anything in return. So I started planting quiet seeds, subtle conversations, letting the right people know that the golden girl they loved might have been hiding a few dark spots. 3 days after I left, Emily sent the first real message: "Jake, I know you're hurt, but can we please talk?" That one was followed by 20 more, all in the same desperate tone, as if she'd only just realized this wasn't a performance. I didn't reply to any of them, and that silence did more damage than any insult ever could. For once, she didn't have the script. I started going to the gym, not for revenge abs, though I'd be lying if I said it wasn't satisfying to feel stronger every day. It gave me structure, something to channel the leftover anger into. That, and sanding down old wood for furniture restoration, yeah, the tacky side hobby Emily used to mock. I posted a few finished pieces online, and to my surprise, someone bought a nightstand I made for $40 the next day. Suddenly, people I didn't know were messaging me for commissions, asking if I could replicate certain styles or ship across state lines. It felt good, productive, like I was finally building something for myself instead of shrinking to fit into her curated life. Emily never cared for handmade things unless they had a 4-digit price tag and a designer label. The irony was rich. The man she dumped for being beneath her was finally feeling 10 feet tall. A week later, Zach called with news: she's demanding alimony. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my drill. According to her, she'd sacrificed her career potential to support my ambition. The same woman who skipped 3 job interviews because they didn't offer valet parking was now pretending she was the backbone of our financial stability. But here's where things got interesting. Turns out, Roman wasn't just her co-worker and lover. He was also leaking private data about her father's business to competitors. I found that out through a college buddy of mine who now works at a firm that almost invested in one of the Whitmore projects. They pulled out last minute after receiving confidential insights from an anonymous source, which now clearly pointed to Roman. I didn't do anything with that information directly, but let's just say Zach knows how to leverage reality in negotiations. Suddenly, Emily's family wasn't so smug anymore. Bradley's LinkedIn posts about integrity and leadership became less frequent, and whispers started spreading in their tight community. The same people who once snickered behind my back were now deeming me like old friends. I didn't gloat, I just stayed quiet and kept working. Then came the day I went back to the old apartment to grab one last box I'd left behind. Emily was there. I didn't expect to see her. It had been weeks, and I figured she'd be off sipping cocktails with Roman in some rooftop bar. But she looked different. Her hair was tied up in a messy bun, no makeup, sweatpants, nothing like the woman who once took an hour to get ready just to walk to the mailbox. She stared at me like she didn't recognize me at first, like I'd become someone else in my absence. She started crying before I even said a word, babbling about how things with Roman weren't what she thought. How she missed me. I picked up my box, nodded once, and said, "Have your lawyer talk to mine." I walked past her like she was a ghost of my old life. In that moment, I realized something that made my heart weirdly light. I didn't want her back. The pain wasn't gone, not completely, but it had changed shape. It was no longer about her. It was about me choosing myself for once. The text started again, this time more frantic. "Jake, please. I made a mistake. I was stupid. Roman lied to me. You were the only real thing in my life." I didn't respond. I'd already said everything I needed to the day I signed those papers without shedding a tear. That night, I posted a photo of a vintage coffee table I'd restored on Instagram. It got more likes than anything Emily ever shared about our simple life. Her best friend, the same one who once told her I wasn't husband material, liked the photo at 2:13 a.m. and unliked it 3 minutes later. I smiled, took a sip of my beer, and went to bed. But the biggest surprise was still coming. 3 months after that cursed birthday, I got a message that stopped me cold. It simply read, "I know you probably hate me, but I can't stop thinking about where we'd be if I hadn't ruined everything." It was from Emily. Again. This time she wasn't just sorry, she was unraveling. I stared at her message for a long time, reading it over and over, expecting it to hit me like a truck. But it didn't. 3 months ago, I would have given anything to hear those words from her. But now they felt like a dusty love letter delivered years too late. I didn't reply that night, didn't even draft a response. I just turned my phone over and went to sleep. The next morning, there were 5 more messages, each one more desperate than the last. She said she couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, that the apartment was cold and lifeless without me. She said Roman had left her the second her father stopped backing him financially, and now she had nothing. I almost felt bad, almost. Then came the final message that actually made me stand up from the couch. "I've been sleeping in my car for 2 nights. I have nowhere else to go." I went to the window and sure enough, there was her white Audi parked across the street. The same car her daddy bought her for her 25th birthday, the one she once called entry-level, even though it cost more than I made in 6 months. She was just sitting there, engine off, staring up at my building like some ghost that didn't know where else to haunt. A part of me wanted to close the blinds and let her sit there all night, the same way I sat alone on my birthday while she and her family laughed at my expense. But the truth is, I'm not built like that. I'm not a monster, and even after everything, I couldn't let someone I once loved freeze in a car overnight. So I pulled on a hoodie, walked outside, and tapped on her window. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, makeup smeared, hair oily, same clothes from an Instagram post she made 4 days ago. She jumped when she saw me, scrambled to unlock the door, almost falling out in her rush to talk. The smell hit me first, fast food wrappers, cheap perfume, and that stale scent of panic no candle can cover up. The second thing I noticed was that she had lost weight, like life had started chipping away at her from the inside. She started talking immediately, her voice cracking as she spilled everything like a confession she couldn't hold anymore. Roman had used her, not just emotionally but professionally. He'd been feeding competitor firms insider info on her family's company, planning to blackmail her father for a promotion. When Bradley found out, he fired Roman on the spot, and within days Roman had vanished. Meanwhile, Emily had been covering for him, forging reports and lying to investors because she thought she was in love. When the dust settled, Bradley cut her off completely. No job, no money, no apartment. She'd tried staying with friends, but none of them were willing to house a scandal magnate, especially one who couldn't pay rent or keep a job. She'd run out of places to crash, and her last resort was me. The man she'd called a disappointment, now her last hope. I let her in. Not because I wanted her back, but because I couldn't leave someone to rot in their own mistakes, not without offering one glass of water. She stepped inside and looked around like she was seeing my place for the first time. "It's really nice," she whispered, like the simple furniture in the houseplant shocked her. Compared to a car seat and fast food wrappers, I guess even my modest apartment felt like the Ritz. I made us coffee and listened while she cried, her hands trembling as she wrapped them around the mug. She admitted her parents orchestrated the birthday ambush, hoping to push me into signing the papers quickly so Emily could take half of everything without a fight. They thought I'd panic, crumble, and hand over my assets in an emotional haze. Instead, I walked away with my spine intact and her family's reputation hanging by a thread. She said she'd realized within weeks that Roman wasn't who she thought he was, but her pride kept her from reaching out. She wanted to fight for me, but couldn't bring herself to admit she'd chosen wrong. "I thought you'd fight for me," she said through tears, and I actually laughed. Not mockingly, just in disbelief. "You handed me divorce papers on my birthday and toasted my humiliation with champagne," I said calmly. "What exactly was I supposed to fight for?" She didn't have an answer, just tears, shaking shoulders, and an apology that came 3 months too late. I told her she could sleep on the couch for the night, but in the morning she needed to figure something else out. The look on her face was pure disbelief, like no one had ever told her no in her entire life. But I didn't feel guilty. I felt relief. For once I wasn't bending to keep someone else comfortable. That night I couldn't sleep, so I sat on my tiny balcony with a beer, watching the street below. Emily's Audi was still parked across from the building, empty now, a ghost of the life she once had. She used to mock my dream of restoring furniture, called it garage sale nonsense. Now it was putting food on my table and giving me a purpose that didn't revolve around someone else's approval. The next morning I made breakfast out of habit: eggs, toast, coffee. She ate slowly, like each bite came with a memory of everything she'd thrown away. Then her phone rang and she answered it on speaker without thinking. It was her father, and for the first time, I heard desperation in his voice. The family business was falling apart, investors had pulled out, lawsuits were piling up, and the damage Roman had done was still unraveling. Bradley actually asked if I would consider meeting to explore opportunities for mutual benefit. The man who once laughed in my face was now, essentially, begging. Emily looked down at her lap, ashamed. I told him I wasn't interested in working with someone who once thought I was unworthy of his daughter. But I did mention I knew someone brilliant at helping companies rebuild their reputation. Her name was Mia, a woman I'd been seeing quietly for the past month. Just friends so far, but she was smart, grounded, and had already helped 2 mid-sized companies bounce back from major PR creases. I gave Bradley her contact info, wished him luck, and hung up. Emily's face crumbled when she realized I'd moved on. Not just emotionally, but mentally, physically, spiritually. I was no longer the man she left, and she was no longer the woman I once begged to believe in me. She left that afternoon with a backpack of essentials and an Uber ride to her sister's place. As she walked out, she turned and asked, "Will you ever forgive me?" I told her I already had, not for her, but for me. Carrying anger is like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies. I had furniture to refinish, places to see, and a life to live that no longer included tiptoeing around anyone's standards. And besides, I had a new roommate now, Max, a 3-legged pit bull I adopted from the shelter last week. 2 months after that final conversation, the divorce was finalized with barely a whimper from Emily's side. Once Zach presented the affair evidence and outlined the public exposure risks, her family's lawyer folded like a cheap tent in a hurricane. No alimony, no claim on my business assets, and we split the apartment sale 70/30 in my favor. I let her keep most of the furniture. I didn't want anything that carried the scent of humiliation or champagne-fueled cruelty. I moved out of the Airbnb and into a quiet little 3-bedroom house just outside the city. It's not fancy, but it has a yard, a small workshop in the garage, and enough space for Max to run around like the unbothered king he is. I wake up to birdsong, not phone pings or fake brunch plans. There's peace here, the kind I didn't realize I'd been missing for most of my adult life. My furniture side hustle has turned into something more, nothing big but steady. Orders come in from people across the country who found my pieces online or through word of mouth. I make custom items with character, history, and flaws things Emily once called garage sale garbage are now paying my mortgage. It's poetic, really. She always wanted luxury, and now I make a living from authenticity. One Thursday night I was eating pizza and watching a Netflix series I didn't even like but was too far in to quit. Max was passed out on the rug, snoring like a little lawnmower. My phone lit up with a Ring doorbell alert at 11:34 p.m., and I assumed it was a raccoon or a neighbor who got lost. But when I opened the app, I saw a car idling across the street. Her car. At first I thought she was just passing through or maybe waiting for someone. But the lights were off, and the car didn't move for over an hour. Then the text started again, soft and frantic all at once. Please come outside. I just need 5 minutes. I have nowhere else to go. I didn't move right away. I watched the feed, half expecting her to give up and drive off like a ghost disappearing into the night. But she didn't. When I finally went to the window, she was still there, curled up in the front seat, like a child hiding from monsters of her own making. I went outside because I'm still not the villain in this story, no matter how hard they tried to make me one. She rolled down the window, and I barely recognized her. Her hair was greasy, eyes hollow, skin pale and drawn tight across her face like grief had wrapped around her ribs. She looked like someone who'd been running from the truth and finally realized the road was a circle. She said she'd been living in her car for nearly a week after being kicked out of her sister's place. Annabelle had given her a couch and some sympathy, but not for free. Emily didn't have rent money or anything to offer except apologies. Her credit cards were frozen thanks to the investigation into her father's business, and she couldn't find work because her resume was built entirely on nepotism. The world had finally stopped spinning around her. She stepped out of the car, holding a duffel bag that looked heavier than her. I noticed a piece of duct tape holding one of her shoes together, and something in my chest twisted. Not pity, just the surreal realization that this woman had once toasted my destruction in $1 million mansion, and now she stood on my lawn like a stray dog hoping for shelter. I let her in, not to stay but to get warm, take a shower, and eat something that didn't come from a gas station. She barely spoke while I reheated leftovers and poured her a glass of water. Max sniffed her once, then went to the other side of the room, unimpressed. Even the dog had boundaries. She asked if I'd been seeing someone, and I told her the truth, yes, but slowly, carefully. Her name was Mia, and we'd been getting to know each other without games, without secrets, without needing to pretend. Emily didn't say much after that. Just nodded, wiped her eyes, and took another bite of lasagna. The next morning I made breakfast and told her she could stay one more night while she figured out her next move. She thanked me like someone who wasn't used to hearing the word yes anymore. I could tell she wanted to ask if there was still a chance, if some part of the old us still existed beneath the rubble. But she didn't, and I respected her a little for that. Right before she left, her phone buzzed and she answered it on speaker by accident again. It was Bradley. He sounded less like a mogul and more like a man clinging to the last rung of a crumbling ladder. "We need help," he said. "We've lost almost everything." Apparently, the investigation had gone deeper than expected. Roman had exposed tax fraud, illegal offshore transfers, and years of falsified contracts. Bradley's accounts were frozen, their assets seized, and their reputation shattered. The Whitmores had gone from country club royalty to a cautionary tale in a business journal. Then came the most unexpected part. He asked if I would consider talking to an old investor who trusted me. Emily looked at me, eyes wide, realizing her father had finally swallowed every ounce of pride left in his brittle body. I didn't answer him directly. I just said, "I know someone who might help," and gave him Mia's contact info. After I hung up, Emily stared at me like she didn't know whether to thank me or cry again. I told her she had a ride waiting, an Uber to Annabelle's friend's house who had agreed to take her in short term. As she stood in the doorway, she asked one final question. "Do you ever think we could have made it if things had gone differently?" I looked at her for a long moment before answering. "I think we were never supposed to last, not because of who we were, but because of what we refused to become." She nodded slowly, then left, and I didn't watch her car disappear this time. I just closed the door and took Max for a walk. Forgiveness doesn't mean reopening the door. It means locking it, tossing the key, and walking away without the weight. Emily taught me what love isn't but manipulation disguised as romance feels like. How conditional affection drains the soul. What started as a betrayal ended as a blueprint for freedom. Now I live a life I built from scratch, no shadows of someone else's expectations, no need to prove I belong in rooms that never welcomed me. I have peace, sawdust on my jeans, coffee in the mornings, and a dog that snores louder than the TV. I don't miss who I was before because that man lived to be chosen. This man chooses himself. So if you're reading this wondering if it gets better, if the pain fades, if the justice comes, if you ever feel whole again, the answer is yes. It may take 6 months, 1,000 tears, and one unexpected dog adoption, but eventually, life bends toward balance. Sometimes the worst thing that ever happens to you is actually the beginning of the best. And sometimes walking away from love is how you finally find yourself. If you had asked me a year ago what would break me, I would have said betrayal. I would have said being humiliated in front of the people who already thought I wasn't good enough. I would have said losing the woman I thought I'd spend forever with. But I was wrong. None of that broke me. It built me. You see, sometimes life rips everything away from you so you can finally see what's been weighing you down. I thought I needed love to be whole, but what I really needed was truth. The truth about who I was, what I deserved, and what I'd been tolerating in the name of loyalty. I was so busy trying to earn a seat at a table that looked down on me, I didn't realize I was starving the whole time. I learned something powerful the day I walked out of that house without shedding a single tear. Not every loss is a tragedy, some are an awakening. When someone shows you what they truly think of you, believe them. And when they laugh at your pain, let that laugh echo in your memory every time you feel like giving in. That sound doesn't haunt me anymore. It motivates me. Forgiveness isn't about giving someone a second chance. It's about giving yourself a fresh start. I didn't forgive her because she deserved it. I forgave her because I deserved peace. Because carrying hate around was like keeping a fire in my chest that only burned me. The moment I let it go, I made space for something better for me. Rebuilding your life after devastation isn't glamorous. It's quiet. It's waking up in a small place that smells like fresh wood and burnt coffee and learning how to breathe again. It's adopting a 3-legged pit bull and realizing he's more loyal than most people you've met. It's doing something with your hands, making furniture, building things not because it's profitable, but because it reminds you that broken pieces can still become something beautiful. So here's my message to anyone who's been hurt, humiliated, or left behind. Don't beg to be seen by people who are blind to your worth. Don't wait for closure from someone who closed the door on you with a smile. Your comeback doesn't need to be loud, it just needs to be real. Grow in silence. Level up in peace. Let them wonder how you became everything they said you couldn't be. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not bitter. I'm free. And I hope someday you will be too.